just as an introduction, I'll play the first part of the really excellent video. You know, some of you have already seen this, the one that was made during the 2017 March 5th Aldebaran Graze in Mississauga, Ontario. And it's really a remarkable effort because, you know, the temperature was below zero with wind and everything, and they really pulled off a great feat getting the observations. So I'll show that just as an introduction, and then, but before 3:10, my Eastern time, our scheduled time, I'll get into that. Let's see. Now I have to. I have it ready right here. Okay. Let's see. I have to share my screen. Let's see. I'll start this and stop. Whoops. Come on. Pause it. Okay. First of all, somehow I have to pull up. I see what I have to do. I have to pull this up so I see my share screen. Here it is. Share. Okay, now you should see it. Grazing occultation of Aldebaran, March 5th.
Yes, we see it.
There.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, it's sort of a self-explanatory. This is just to get an idea of grazing occultations, you know, what they entail, what they're like.
David, it might be good if you stopped your video temporarily while this is playing.
Okay, let's see, I have to, let's see, right. Okay, I'm not going to, I'm going to stop it now. So it has an instant, they just play it over again one more time, which is interesting, but you know, it's sort of the same thing. So anyway, I give the link in my presentation. I'll go to the presentation now, which is this one right here. Okay. Okay. Anyway, last year we didn't really have we had an IOTA meeting in conjunction with the Riverside. Let's see, can you hear me all right?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Okay, okay. So last year we had the IOTA meeting at the Riverside Telescope Makers Conference up in the mountains in California. There wasn't very good internet connection there, so we couldn't do anything online, and not very many people really attended that meeting. So the last meeting where we actually had sizable attendance was in 2018, and even then that was at the NEAF meeting in Suffern, New York, where I last presented the grazing occultations. So anyway, the few others are still observing grazing occultations, but in this presentation, I'm only reporting on the grazes that Joan and I have observed and some lunar events. So first, I'll talk about the 2018 July 10th Aldebaran Graze, the last graze of this series of Aldebaran occultations that occurred. Then on the next year, then May 11th, 2019. You see, we don't do grazes nearly as much as we used to. We're doing only about one a year now. We got an interesting graze of this sixth magnitude star in the Beehive cluster, and also got scads of total occultation timings. And we had to go mobile for that because it was very cloudy here in the Washington, D.C. area. And then finally, we were in Arizona for on January 2nd UT. This year it was actually New Year's Day evening, local time, where we had a fourth magnitude graze. And then finally, also while we were in Arizona, we got lots of total occultation timings during the Milky Way passage. So let's see. So anyway, Aldebaran grazes were well observed in 2016 and 2017, you can see the observations plotted against the LRO profiles here for the 2016 July 29th graze that we did in conjunction with the IOTA meeting in Stillwater, Oklahoma. And then you just saw the video about the 2017 March 5th graze. We also observed that event from the Hudson Valley in New York, where the temperature was a balmy 12 degrees. But anyway, you can see that the observed points agree quite well with the predicted profile. But you can see both of these were northern limit grazes, and you could see that the observed points all showed a slight south shift from the predicted profile. So the graze on July 10th, 2018, though, was a southern limit graze. So we were curious to know if we would see a similar shift, because the idea was that these shifts were probably due, I mean, everything should be rock solid known, but the stars, especially the bright ones, the positions are hard to accurately measure. And of course, we don't have any Gaia data on Aldebaran. It's, although we might by the time they're done, but they do have Hipparchus data on it. But with the short time span for determining the proper motions, we were thinking that the errors that we're seeing for grazes like this, the differences, a few hundredths of an arcsecond, are due to proper motion error in the star. So anyway, this shows that last graze, and it occurred starting at moonrise. The moon was only 11% sunlit, so it was a pretty graze, but only visible from a short stretch in the Great Lakes area, moonrise in Iowa. But we decided to go to Michigan to observe it. But you see there are two other expeditions shown here, and the link that I give here is the link to that video that I showed earlier. You can see it online there. But there was an expedition. Jim Small came up from St. Louis to observe it at only about 2 degrees altitude from Wisconsin near the Mississippi River. And Andreas Gada led another expedition from Toronto up to observe near Earlton to observe it. And I just talk quickly about that first. Mostly clear skies were forecast, but they had broken low clouds. Fortunately, they thinned enough during the graze that the star could be recorded through them. They just got a couple of stations, got some data. And then, as I mentioned, Jim Small traveled to the Alcon convention in Minneapolis, and on his way up there, it just happened the timing was right to observe near DeSoto, Wisconsin, for the graze. He said he was able to observe a few occultations of the star, but I haven't seen his video. Finally, then, now this shows the path where we could observe. We wanted to try it because the next one won't be in good graze won't be until 2034, September 5th, that we will might be able to observe, and that passes over the Washington D.C. area and over in Annapolis. Anyway, let's just go. This just shows a view of the graze. And zooming in on the area, we've got a motel in Mackinac City and set up along sites. I mean, the altitude was only 7 degrees in the east, so we didn't have any choice but to observe from sites right along the lake shore. And so we, anyway, we selected 4 narrow regions that we wanted to cover, and we're going to set up mighty minis to get some remote station recordings, and also with MIDI telescopes too. Anyway, we got observations only from 2 of the zones. One of the zones we couldn't cover because we couldn't get access to the beach. And then at zone 3, the remote station there failed to record, but we did get 2 recordings at the northernmost stations 1 and 2, where we had attended stations, and using a 5-inch celestron, we got the best recording. But it was a very old telescope. It's 30 years old or more, and it's been to eclipses around the world and beat up and not well collimated. We have a much better scope now for that sort of thing. And then the other 2 stations were mighty minis in the 4th area. And this just shows just a couple of pictures from the video showing the star and showing it occulted at our 2 stations, at 1A and 1B. So I wanted to get a good color video, but it didn't work out very well with the 5-inch celestron. It showed the events, but we got good timings out of them. And you can see with the MIDI, star there and star gone. And then this shows the remote stations that we had, also a MIDI and a MINI at those 2 stations sites. This just shows, not very well, shows the MIDI station that Joan ran sitting on a bench. We got permission from the homeowners there to observe from their patio, back patio. And this is a view of the moon and the Pleiades over the lake, very pretty. But now to the observations. This is a reduction of the graze observations themselves. In all of these plots, the radial distance from the moon is plotted as the vertical component, with height above the moon being the highest. You can see our observed points here from stations 4A and B. They were the southernmost, and our stations 1A and 1B here. And here's a zoom in of the stations 4B. Curiously, the mean radial residuals are negative, as they were for the 2016 and 2017 north limit grazes. Thus, we had a south shift for the north limit grazes and a north shift for the south limit grazes. So rather than being due to proper motion error in the star, maybe due to the LRO Lola profile. So I think there's still some value in observing grazes. It's not as immediate as with asteroid occultations and everything, but we actually learned something interesting from this observation. And I don't know what the ramifications are. Who cares? The corrections are pretty small, only a few tens of meters, but they're there. Maybe it's because the laser ranging data themselves are accurate to better than a meter. But they have to model the orbit of the spacecraft, which is affected by lunar perturbations. I'll go back to 2019, May 11th. Then the moon passing through the Praecipe cluster. This just shows a picture prediction, and this shows the forecast. There was really bad clouds all around, and we saw this little clear area between in Michigan and northern Indiana. So we decided to head there. So we drove there, and then decided on the morning before the event where exactly to go, because it was still uncertain which part of the area would have the best. And so we ended up staying for the night at this motel in Coldwater, Michigan, so that we could either go east this way or go south this way. And at first it looked like the clouds would not clear off to the south, but as we saw the motion just before we left, we said, oh, they are, and the sights were better down this way, so we decided to go to this DeKalb County Airport north of Fort Wayne. And this shows the actual weather satellite photo showing that we were nicely in the clear there. There was clear sky in Southern Virginia, which wasn't predicted, and although that would have been a much shorter drive for us, it would have been much more humid and probably not quite as successful. This just shows one of the pictures. We used a 10-inch suitcase telescope. We just decided not to try to deal with a 16-inch scope to take it there. We recorded over 40 occultation events, the most that we had ever recorded in one night. So this was just before one of these occultations of one of the 8th or 9th magnitude stars. This just shows, and actually on that, let's see, what do I do? I should go back. I just wanted to mention that we had 5 disappearances and reappearances of that star of ZC1298 during the Praecipe passage. So we had 10 graze events and then 30 other total occultation timings. Then fast forward to this year, then 2019 January 2nd. This year there was a graze of 33 Piscium with a 40% sunlit moon, cusp angle 11 degrees south, so a nice event. And the path crossed the northern and western suburbs of Phoenix, where we were living in Fountain Hills at our place there at the time. So this just shows we were observed from this road south of Tonopah, Arizona, about 60 miles, 50 miles west of Phoenix, to get into this graze path. So this shows the predicted profile. There wasn't a clear place where there would be lots of events, but the event indicator showed a slight rise in this area. Somehow that arrow got placed. It should be down here. So we set up to get the, we ended up getting 4 occultations of the star. We got 3 disappearances and 4 reappearances. The very first disappearance we missed because the IOTA video capture froze just at the inopportune sign. Joan quickly, we saw that, and Joan rebooted it, and and so we were able to get the rest of the data. But also the observations for this event were lost in a drive failed. We lost all our early 2020 observations. We'd reported all the asteroid events up until then, so none of them were lost except for one event which we had just observed, and just from memory I was able to figure out what happened during that asteroid event. But I had saved the video file for this graze and the peyote analysis we did, but we did lose the DAT file that Joan had already created an analysis. We just haven't had time yet to recreate it to properly report the event. And also this graze was observed from Missouri, an expedition by Bob Sandy. And I'll just show a letter here about that. This one fellow, Joe Wright, lives in the path. He said, Bob set up about 3 miles northeast of my place, north of Kansas City, as the crow flies, and he had 15 events. So he had the profile lined up much better for them than for us. So instead of 10 events or 8 events, he had almost twice as many. And he said, at my home observatory, it was predicted as a miss, but I had 4 events. Not often one can just walk out of their home and capture such an event. Anyway, that was, and then the last thing I want to talk about is, although we don't have passages of the moon through the Praecipe or any first magnitude grazes coming up for a while, every spring and autumn, you can get the moon passing through the Milky Way, a crescent moon. And that happened on April 28th this year. And we were able to record, this time we used our Skywatcher and the QHY camera. Joan prepared this nice table of the events, all the events that we observed. And 3 of them we recorded at very high speed. And they do show the tail of the diffraction curve being resolved. But it's tricky to do that. This shows how we had to go to smaller frame sizes to get the higher rates. And this shows the time sap error rates that we were getting when we went to those fast rates. But anyway, one of the events was we thought might be double, but Peyote said no. And then 3 of the number of these events with note 3 were stars that were supposed to be double according to the predictions, but we didn't see any evidence of them. And in addition, besides these events, we put the telescope away, but then there were 2 more occultations at 6 degrees altitude an hour later. And so I recorded them with a 5-inch scope, and they'll be reported separately. So that's all I have for my first talk. And with that, I'll go to the second one. Let's see now, I have to, yeah. Okay, I want to close.